What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. Today is one of my favorite videos. We're doing a book wrap up. All the books that I read in the month of December 2023. I usually also tell you guys what I plan to read in the month of January, but I honestly haven't even had a chance to think about it. So we're just going to go over what I read in December of 2023. And I'll also shortly be filming another video where I go over my top 23 reads of 2023. So these are like the best books that I read in 2023 and the ones that I would recommend the most. So if you're interested in more content like that, be sure to subscribe before you leave. If you've never been here for one of my book wrap-up videos before, I do not give any spoilers in these wrap-ups. I just give a brief summary. Well, brief for me, because if you have been here before, you know that I never stop talking. And then I give my thoughts on the book. I also give a rating, star rating of a scale of 1 to 5, and a spice factor rating of a scale of 1 to 5 if it's a romance or something. Some of the books that are going to be in here are Christmas reads. Christmas reads, I'm looking for fluff. I'm looking for vibes. So sometimes those are going to be ranked higher. That doesn't mean I think it's like the next great American novel or something, but it gave me the vibes I was looking for. I read 15 books in the month of December. The first book that I read in the month of December started me out very strong, and it was Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I doubt I'm pronouncing that correctly. So this book I gave a 4.25 out of 5. And I gave 0 out of 5 when it came to spice. So it was a squeaky clean. There is a hint of romance in it, but nothing explicit. I think there's maybe a kissing scene or a flirtation, and that's it. So this follows Evie, who has recently lost her job through no fault of her own. And she is walking through the woods and happens to stumble on a person who needs help. Well, it turns out the person who needed help was the town's villain. And he's notorious for how awful he is. He offers her a job on the spot, and she decides to take it, but her family can never know that she's working for him. This book was wicked and charming. Those were the two words that when I finished it, those were the two words that came to mind. It was also, the humor was so up my alley. It was very like dry sarcasm. And I fell in love with the characters. The reason why it's not a 5-star for me, in terms of enjoyment, I would say this is like a 5-star. If you're not gonna get super technical about stuff and you just want like a cozy mystery, this is the epitome of a cozy mystery. But it felt a little patchy at times, and it felt like there wasn't a lot of development when it came to the story and the world that they're in. Like, I was a little confused because it would dip into history, but not give like a full history on it, and then it would like jump back into present time. So I was getting confused. This was a debut novel, which blew me away, to be honest. I read something online where she had started out the story on TikTok, and then there was enough of a demand for it that she turned it into a book. I didn't fact check, so I don't know if that's 100% true, but if it is, that's really cool. The book does end on a cliffhanger, but it wasn't a super frustrating one, if that makes sense. It was enough that I'm going to definitely want to read the second one, and I feel like the author will get even better as she like sinks into this. Okay, so the next book that I read was called Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 star, and it is 0 out of 5 when it comes to spice. It is a historical romance. I will say that the author does provide a content warning prior to you proceeding with the book. I would definitely read that if you're looking for a squeaky clean romance, because this does touch on explicit topics, but none of them happen on page, but they are discussed. So if anything makes you uncomfortable, I would just read that content warning before proceeding. I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book. I went into this book completely blind. Generally, I don't read summaries on books unless I'm like in a very specific mood. Well, this book is very faith-based and very based in organized religion. I grew up in a Catholic household. I went to a Catholic high school, but as I've progressed in life, I found myself personally just leaning more towards being a spiritual person and not somebody that necessarily associates with one specific religion, if that makes sense. That's just my personal journey. I feel like because of that, I was able to kind of see both sides of this book, whereas if I feel like if you're in one camp versus the other camp, you may have either, you know, like kind of not, I don't want to say a bias, but you know what I'm trying to say, okay? If faith-based content is not for you and it makes you uncomfortable, I just would completely skip this book because it is very rooted in faith. And as beautiful and as much as I respect the people that, you know, strongly believe in that, I felt sometimes it did a disservice to the main female character in the book. And I can't really say anything else without giving away spoilers. By the end of the book, I feel like I really got pulled into the story, and I feel like the author does a lot of work to kind of make up for my issues from the beginning of the book. If you're in the middle of this book, if you pick it up and you're like, whoa, some of the verbiage is inappropriate, some of the lessons are inappropriate, try and stick it out. Maybe you'll still be frustrated by the end. But for me, I just felt like it really pulled me back in by that last 20%. So I ended up feeling it was a 4-star read. I think that there's a lot of great messages in it. I think some of them were a little muddled, but I think we got there. But I have to give it to the author because it was a very touchy subject. I didn't feel like it was too preachy for something that was so faith-based. It didn't feel too preachy to me. I felt like I said, there was a lot of really great messages in there. And if you are faith-based, if you are specifically Christian, this may be like one of your favorite reads, because I could definitely see how this one would appeal to a lot of people. Okay, so the next book that I read was Christmas Honeymoon for One, and this was by Hope August. So this one was just short and sweet for me. I felt like it was completely unrealistic, which, let's be honest, most Christmas romances are going to be unrealistic, but this felt extra unrealistic to me. But the main thing that I didn't love about this one is they pretend like it's a enemies to lovers, but in reality, it's like a mild dislike strangers to lovers. You know what I mean? Like, they just kind of got a bad first impression, and then it goes away really quickly, and then all of a sudden it's more of like a meet cute. I am like a diehard enemies to lovers fan, so if you're trying to like tease me with that, you're gonna lose me when you don't actually pull through. Okay, so the next book that I read was called The Mistletoe Bet by Maren Moore. This one I gave a 3 out of 5, and Spice was a 1.5 out of 5 Peppas, okay? This one, a lot of people were posting this on social media, so take this with a grain of salt, because maybe you would absolutely love it, because a lot of people did. I just could not connect with the characters, and I just felt like the story was missing like pizzazz. It just felt like nothing was really happening, and the main female character was just very like bratty and whiny to me. So for me, it's like once that starts happening, I can't get past it. The next book that I read was Forever Christmas by Kat Cahill. And this book is part of the Gilbert Girls series. It's like a historical romance novella. Super short and sweet. It was, I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Stars. I forgot to say that. And 0 out of 5 on Spice, so it is squeaky clean. It follows a widow whose husband had passed away, and unfortunately he was not the best husband in the entire world. So in a way, she's looking forward to this new chapter in her life. She has an estranged brother that she goes to try and reconnect with at his place of business, which happens to be like a hotel or an inn or something. And she meets a man, and both of them have reasons to not pursue a relationship with one another, but they end up just not being able to stay away from one another, basically. I felt like it got a little repetitive at times, but I just loved the entire concept. I thought it was so wholesome, so heartfelt. It was a really touching story. There's a family reunion situation that happens, and I loved the way that it was done. The time frame that it was set in was just so cute. It had all the vibes. So if you're looking for like a way to step back in time and get some really like butterfly moments, this would be a cute book for you. Okay, the next book that I read was called The Savage Wild by Roxy Noir. I gave this one a 2 out of 5 on the Stars and a 1 out of 5 on the Spice Factor. This follows Imogen, who ran away from her small town a very long time ago due to someone being incredibly cruel to her. She's recently been awarded a research grant, and she's trying to get to a remote place in Canada. And when she gets to the airport, she finds out that all of the flights have been canceled. So she decides she's going to charter a private plane, and the only person who is able to charter that plane happens to be the person that was cruel to her back in high school. The storyline on this was so good. Like, this should have been such a good book. And I read another book by her and absolutely loved it. But the problem was the main male character in this book. He was an absolute turd face. He was a turd bucket. He was a jerkwad. Whatever you want to call it, he just was not nice. There was absolutely no growth for him whatsoever from high school to present day. Supposedly he had joined the military in between high school and present day, and somehow didn't pick up any form of responsibility or accountability for his actions. It just felt completely unbelievable. I loved the main female character, so that's why this was a 2-star, not a 1-star, because I loved the female character. She deserves so much more. So hopefully there will be a sequel where she like dumps his stupid behind, and then she gets to like actually fall in love with one of her coworkers or something, because she deserves someone better. I would definitely read that. Okay, the next book that I read was from one of my favorite authors, Hes Not My Type by Megan Quinn. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on Stars, and I gave a 3 out of 5 on Spice, which is pretty high for Miss Megan. This one follows Halsey, who is a professional hockey player, and he has turned into somebody that most of his friends do not even recognize since losing his twin brother due to a tragedy. He hasn't felt spark in life like he used to feel, and he doesn't know what to do, until he happens to meet Blakely, and he feels she is bringing the energy that he was looking for. But he finds out that she's already in a long-term relationship with somebody else. I feel like this book took me on a roller coaster of emotions. Megan Quinn has the ability to make you like cackle and then sob all within the same novel. And what I love about Megan Quinn's books is I don't feel like she follows a standard format when it comes to like a timeline and when scenes happen and things like that. She just does her own thing. It always just feels so genuine and so fresh. What kept this from a 5-star for me is it felt like the ending was a little rushed. So some of the real estate from earlier in the book, I feel like could have been used to develop the ending. Okay, the next book that I read, buckle up you guys, it was Iron Flame. This is a full 5-star read for me, and Spice on this one was a 1 out of 5. This is a romantasy. This one I feel like had less romance than the first one does. I normally give summaries, but in order to avoid spoilers for Fourth Wing, which is the first book in the series, which I would definitely recommend reading first, I'm going to forego that here. Listen, when I tell you guys my soul exited my body after reading this book, it was so intense. And I had, unfortunately, I didn't see any spoilers, but I had seen some reviews with feelings and thoughts on this book. And a lot of people were saying it was slow and that they felt like there was too much information and it wasn't compelling and it wasn't captivating. I have no idea if I read a different book than they did or what, but I was sucked into this book right away. I am not a fantasy reader, and I think the author did a great job at building a world that I could understand. I think that's the part that's intimidating when you're not a fantasy reader, is I don't want to have charts and post-it notes and annotate books in order to keep track of characters and sections and all of that stuff. I loved the character development. I actually enjoyed the fact that the romance was pulled back a little bit because I felt like the action really took over in this book. I loved how the ending was done. It's a cliffhanger, so it's got me roped in for the next book, but I don't feel frustrated. I don't feel like I wanted to throw my Kindle across the room or anything. I don't know. I cannot recommend this series enough, especially if you've been thinking about dipping into fantasy. I actually convinced my husband after this book we both are not audiobook people, but we're going to be doing a lot of Disney road trips. So I finally convinced him to listen to the audiobook of Fourth Wing. So I'm actually about 70% through Fourth Wing, my second read. We're doing it on audiobook though, and his first time. And when I tell you, my husband, he loves like Game of Thrones, he loves Star Wars. He's more into like sci-fi fantasy type stuff than I am. He loves Fourth Wing. Like, his commentary is hilarious. He's so jazzed up. You can see the adrenaline like pumping in his veins as we're listening to this book. The audiobook is phenomenal, and I usually, like I said, cannot do audiobooks. Okay, the next book that I read was Wreck the Halls by Tessa Bailey. This is a spicy holiday romance. And before I get into my rating or my review, I want to say this. If you are dipping into the spicy romance type books, Tessa Bailey is one that you're going to see everywhere. I enjoy her books, but I'm not like a massive fan. I completely love for other people that they enjoy her books so much, because all I want is for everybody to read great books. But before I tell you my review, I just wanted to mention that because some people think she's too hyped up. I'm kind of somewhere in between. This one though was a 5-star for me. Okay, a 5-star. Spice was only 1 out of 5. The plot on this book was just so good. 2 women formed a rock band, and they broke up when still pregnant with Beat and Melody. They have a famous hatred for one another since the band broke up. Nobody knows the cause of the breakup. So Beat and Melody were supposed to be best friends, but instead they end up spending their lives just in the shadow of their mothers who hate one another now. And they find out that there's a production company that's trying to make a reunion happen, and they will both benefit if they can get the reunion show to happen. I did not expect this book at all. Just like I mentioned before, I go into books blindly, so I didn't know what I was about to read. I just knew that it was Tessa Bailey. I just knew that it was a Christmas story. I don't even feel like you have to read this at Christmas, because honestly, the plot itself, what I just told you, really carries the entire book. I don't feel like it had very many Christmas vibes at all, to be honest with you, but the plot, the characters, just, I mean, the drama, the suspense, everything about it was just so well done. Some people didn't like it, but I just felt like the female main character was so refreshing, and she just like took me away. I just absolutely loved her. I felt like she was adorable. She was genuine. She was going through a lot. It was messy. It was unfiltered. I don't know. I want you guys to read it. Okay, I really want you to read it. Even though we're past Christmas now, like I said, the actual plot on that book, I don't feel like it was heavy on the Christmas vibes, and you could read it whenever. Okay, the next book that I read was called Christmas in Coconut Creek, and this is by Carissa Kinward. And this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars and 2 out of 5 on the spice factor. This follows Ophelia, who's on her way to Florida to spend Christmas with her best friend that she hasn't seen in a while. She is in the airport on her way to Florida, and she happens to be checking out a dating profile for a guy that she matched with, and she's zooming in on particular body parts. Well, it just so happens that the man on the profile is standing directly behind her in the airport, and they end up sitting next to each other on the plane. Let me tell you about this book, okay? Before you proceed, because you're like, oh, Kate said it was a 4-star and that's a solid for Kate. This book is very toxic. There's a lot of very immature comments. It reads like a college romance, but these people are supposed to be in their late 20s and 30s. Having said all that though, I did love it. I really did. I felt like it wasn't a typical Christmas book. It's set in Florida, so there's some tropical vibes, but there's also a Christmas decorating plot happening. I felt like there was no filter, which I enjoyed, but for some people that might be a problem, you know what I mean? But the spicy scenes were abundant here. So if you're not into spicy books, I wouldn't go with this one, because they were, I feel like, kind of carrying the book in certain ways. I really liked the characters, and even though there was kind of the college romance thing happening, it was fun, it was fresh. If you're looking for like a sexy read, this would be the one for you. Okay, so the next book that I read was actually a thriller, and this was called Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This one I gave a 4 out of 5. This follows Mallory, who is a recovering addict, and she is trying to get back out into the job world. She connects through one of her mentors with a family that needs a nanny. And the child that she is nannying for is named Teddy. She absolutely loves him and loves the family, but as she's spending more time with them, she realizes that Teddy is starting to display some very disturbing behaviors. Okay, what I loved about this book was it was incredibly uncomplicated. There were not 15 characters for like a whodunit situation. It like has a little bit of a paranormal aspect to it, creepy vibes, easy to follow, easy to connect all the characters. I just felt like the style of writing was incredibly refreshing for a thriller. I don't know, it almost had like kind of like a true crime podcast feel to it, and I was like reading the script after the podcast was done or something. I would be shocked that somebody could guess the ending on this, because I didn't see it coming at all, and I'm usually good about stuff like that. After I finished reading it and after I did my review, I actually saw there was a lot of people that have very valid concerns about some of the language in this book, so I would just research that before diving in, because I don't know, for me it didn't deter me from the book, but I also kind of didn't at the time know the depth of it. So take that as you will. Maybe you don't want to look it up. Maybe you do. I don't know. I just want you to be comfortable when you're reading something, so you might want to look it up. Okay, so what happened next was I was done with like Christmas books, and I was done with that thriller that I wanted to read. I didn't want to dive into anything else too heavy. I just kind of wanted like an escape. And so I don't know what made it happen, but I decided that I wanted to read arranged marriages. Not marriages of convenience. I want to read where like the families set them up and force them to marry each other. I don't know why. I don't know where it came from. It's never been one of my things. I'm so glad I did, because I read the book King of Wrath by Anna Huang. Hopefully I'm saying her last name correctly. I apologize if that was butchered. This one follows Dante and Vivian. They are from different culture backgrounds, but their families both have an agreement that family expansion comes before love. So their families arrange a marriage for each other. Vivian is determined to make the best of the situation because she knew it was coming. But Dante has such a hatred for Vivian's father. He continues to be a jerk face to Vivian, basically. I absolutely loved this one, okay? I just felt like I was looking for just like pure entertainment when it came to the arranged marriage thing. Like I just wanted like chaos and like mafia vibes or whatever. But I ended up with so much more out of this book. It does hit all of those notes. It has like pure entertainment. It has some chaos. It has family drama. It has rich people drama. It has the things that I was looking for. But then it also had such a beautiful writing style, and I felt like the characters were incredibly well-rounded. I loved their story. I loved their journey. I loved how the enemies to lovers felt incredibly genuine. It didn't feel like it was forced. I don't know. I just loved everything about this. So after I read that arranged marriage, I was like trying to like search for that again. So I read a couple more. So the next one that I read was called Contractually Yours by Nadia Lee. So this one I gave a 3 out of 5 for stars, 1 out of 5 for spice. This one follows Lucien, who is the CEO of a company, but due to the wording in her grandfather's will, in order for her to have full access to the company, she needs to find a husband. So she turns to another established family that also does arranged marriages, and she marries one of the brothers of the company. This one was completely ridiculous, completely cringy, but it had that chaotic energy that I was looking for. The writing just felt a little juvenile, unfortunately. I don't know. Maybe it's because I just finished like a 5-star one, and then diving into that, it just wasn't ever gonna live up to it type thing. Okay, the next book that I read was called A Vow of Hate by Lila James. This was another one that I was just looking for, that arranged marriage chaos. This one, another 3 out of 5. This one, the spice was way higher. This one I gave a 3 out of 5 on the spice as well. This one follows Juliana and Killian, and they're informed that they're going to be married in 3 years by their families. This was just pure nonsense, to be honest. It was completely unrealistic. Like, if you guys end up dipping into this one, you're gonna be like, girl, completely unrealistic. But there was a lot of twists and turns happening that I totally did not expect. Some of them I could figure out, but there were some twists and turns that were happening. Very high cringe moments and very, very toxic, very toxic. But if that's like, sometimes that's the vibe, you know what I mean? Okay, and then the last book that I read in the month of December was King by S.J. Tilley. This one I would classify more as like dark romance. Dark, spicy romance. This one I give a 3 out of 5 on the stars and 3 out of 5 on spice. Highly spicy. This one follows Savannah, who is dating a man. She's on a 3rd date, and they show up at her best friend's house, and his wife is a mutual friend of her best friend's and sitting right there. She didn't know he was married. The wife's brother ends up ending him, if you will, and Savannah is witness to it because she's in the wrong place at the wrong time. So he ends up taking Savannah and forcing her to be his wife. Very spicy, very ridiculous, completely unbelievable, but it was entertaining, but also cringy. But I will say that the humor had me cackling a lot, and I really liked Savannah. The plot just felt like it was all over the place. I felt like the author was just kind of like doing the kitchen sink situation where she just like takes a bunch of like suspense elements and like throws them in there for good measure. There was like random villains popping up left and right. It just kind of felt chaotic, but sometimes that's what you're looking for. I would definitely look up trigger warnings on this one because it is on the darker side. Okay, so those are all of the books that I read in the month of December. Like I said, I have no idea what I want to read in January. All I know is that one of my friends asked me for what book she should start 2024 with. My recommendation to her was Right Man, Right Time by Megan Quinn. I love that one, and that was the vibe she was looking for. And I decided, since I recommended that to her, I would also start with a Megan Quinn. So I am reading The Lineup by Megan Quinn as my first read of 2024. I would love to know what yours is. Let me know in the comments down below what is going to be your first read of 2024. If you're not following me on Instagram, my Instagram for books is at Kate Chapters. On there, I share book recommendations. I also share some templates in case you want to do any like book challenges, book reviews, and things like that on your own social media. So that is all. I hope you got what you needed when you clicked on this thumbnail. I hope you find a great read somewhere in my recommendations, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye.